Hi everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and I am just doing a quick video here. I'm in the midst of working and cleaning. Today is a full moon, and so that for me is taking all the decks out of my cubicles, spritzing them with Kelly's Mojo spray, and putting them back in. I've also this year been swapping decks, so instead of all of my decks being in my bookcase, every time it's coming up to a, not every full moon, but when we're coming up to one of the wheels of the spoke, so to speak, in the wheel of the year, I am sort of putting decks away and pulling out new decks and just trying to freshen my space that way, as well as all my shelves and sacred space and things like that. Everything comes down, spritzed, put back on. It's kind of a refresher period. And so that's what I'm doing today, along with working and laundry and all that fun stuff. But this morning, and I'm also doing some walkthroughs in between, because as I've been cleaning my decks out, I just have a cubicle that is stacked full of decks that I need to do walkthroughs of. So I've been knocking out some Lenormand ones, which I'm just going to schedule them a bunch of walkthroughs, just have them scheduled out for every so often. But I need to reduce the size, so those are quick and easy ones, and I've been so busy, so I just like do some stuff, then knock out a Lenormand walkthrough, do some stuff, knock out a Lenormand walkthrough. But Simon over at the Hermit's Cave, I almost said Two Spirits, I'll put a link to his video below, did a video this morning called My Circle of Friends. And so he talked about how he saw tarot, or how he often personifies tarot or decks, certain decks, and he will, you know, have a past experience with this particular deck, and so then he will, you know, tend to go back to that deck for that same type of situation, and, you know, kind of talked about how that related to how he sees different friends that he has. So again, video below. I'm not gonna, you know, have to go into all of his stuff. I don't tend to personify my decks in terms of them being people so much. I mean, I do talk about decks, certain decks call to me. I definitely talk about decks as having their own voices. I get a little bit kind of cringy when I see that people get really seem to get upset, like if they leave their decks are on the shelf too long and they feel like their decks are feeling neglected, and they start to feel literally guilty about like their decks being on the shelf. And I just want to say, no, they're fine, you know. I have hundreds of books in which I love my books so much, but they're okay hanging out on the shelf, and so are my decks. Like, they're there waiting. That's the best thing about them. They're waiting, and as soon as you go back to them, it's like, hello, I've missed you. But that's neither here nor there. As you can see, I have definitely made my own rules. I'm sorry, Simon. I think his concept is great, but I went to sit down to pull decks for it, and I was just thinking, you know, when I looked at his first one, which was about, I think it was a brutally honest friend, and then it was a wise mentor, and then these things. I wasn't thinking in decks. I was thinking in systems. It's how my brain works. And so I figured that's okay. We will just roll with the way my brain works for my video. So these are the decks I've chosen, and they've not necessarily been specific decks, but more just kind of, you know, representing their system. So the very first category was brutally honest. And I do have tarot decks that are different. I do think that when we have, like Simon's explained, for me, it's not so much that the deck itself is brutally honest, but that for whatever reason, its artwork, its style, its voice, as I would say, taps us into that place where we can be brutally honest with ourselves. Because I do believe that decks are mirrors, right? And I think that's part of the problem with the idea of people feeling guilty about decks being on the shelf and these kinds of things. The concern for me would be that they kind of might miss the knowledge that the reading is within you. And so these decks are simply helping you. There's something about this particular artwork or deck that excuse me, is helping you to be really honest with yourself in that moment. And so then you go back to it because, as Simon said, you know, once you've had that experience, you're going to say, okay, I need that, so I'm going to go back to that particular deck. And so that is amazing. And I do have different tarot decks, so I probably should have just done it the way that it was, but this is what kept coming forward, so I just decided to have fun. I can always do another one if I want. This won't take all that long. So this is, of course, my own Lenormand deck because it's mine, and nothing can be more of a mirror than a deck that you painted, right? And so I definitely picked Lenormand for being, I don't know that I would say brutally honest, but very clear and concise and doesn't pull a lot of punches. Again, for me personally, Lenormand taps me into that place of that sort of sister, auntie, friend that is just going to be like, look, this is a situation. This is how things stand. What are you going to do about it? Let's work our way through this. It's not really time to cry about things. It's not time to sniffle and moan, and you know, let's just get on with the business of seeing how things are and how are we going to move forward. That's sort of, for me, the voice that Lenormand takes on. Now, Lenormand can give really encouraging readings, or I can get messages that are really encouraging, really uplifting, really supportive, really spiritual. So it does not mean that it isn't capable of doing all of those things, but for me it does it in a very practical, let's get down to business sort of manner. And so it's one of the things that I absolutely love about working with Lenormand deck. And so I definitely had to, for my circle of friends, pick Lenormand for my brutally honest friend here. The second one was a wise mentor. Now, I almost went with a tarot deck here, but I didn't want to have I was trying to figure out best places to put things, and I decided to go with geomancy because geomancy, and I have videos on geomancy, so this is not meant to teach geomancy or anything like that, but geomancy is the oldest system, I would say, that I work with, because, I mean, I do I Ching, which was very old, would be probably the oldest, but I don't I don't work with that as much as these systems. And, you know, they started writing about geomancy in the 800s. And so this is a very, very old system. And it also, there's that wisdom of something that has survived that long. The other thing that I find about geomancy that is so powerful for me is that it does strip everything back to the elements, right? Which is very key for me in all of my practices about surrounding the elements and energy and how does energy move. And so that's what we're down to with elements, with geomancy. We're down to fire and air and water and earth, and how are they moving. It's also can be brutally honest. It's a very clear system. It's one of the few systems, along with cartomancy, that I go to for just straight up yes and no questions. I think it does really good with that, but it's so, for me, it's just so old and it's so base level energy. How is energy moving? Here you go. So I had to use, plus I've said this a million times and people laugh, but the first time I really experienced geomancy, it was the first time I really had that experience of feeling like I've done this before. I've done this in a past life. So I wasn't Cleopatra, but I might have been a geomancer. So I used geomancy for a wise mentor. For polar opposite, I had to pick an affirmation deck because for so long I was like, no. I am much more of a Lenormand person. I mean, I am very sympathetic. I can be very nurturing and all of these kinds of things. So it's not that I'm a very harsh person, because that's not my personality type, but I am, I'm like, okay, I hug it out. And then now let's get to work. Like, how can we fix this? So I do have that sort of nature of wanting to work our way through things. Okay, let's figure out let's get our way, work our way through things. So hug decks for me, and I did a whole video on nice washing, so I'm not going to go into that. But I definitely spent a lot of time saying no, affirmation decks are great, but it's not for me. And I have found a place for them. I have very few compared to the other decks that I have, but I do have, are very supportive. And this was the very first one that I got that really taught me that. And this is the Namaste deck, and it actually has blessings written on the back of it. And sometimes we just need a hug. And sometimes we just need some support and some beautiful color. And there is a place for decks that are just there to just give you a feeling of like, okay, you can do this. You can move forward, right? You can handle this. Come on, let's hug this out. It's going to be okay. Kind of get your hugs out and then go to the Lenormand, right? So, of course, again, I'm not saying just this particular deck. This is more for me a system or category of more what I would call affirmation style decks that are going to just kind of give you a supportive boost when you most need it. So that would be my polar opposite. My cheeky deck, I had to go with Sibylla. Now, I do think that Kipper is also a little bit cheeky, so I kind of struggle, but Kipper is a lot closer to Lenormand, and so I felt like I already kind of had, it's also very clear like Lenormand, so I kind of felt like Kipper and Lenormand over here, but Sibylla is such a cheeky deck. It is a cartomancy style deck. I think cartomancy in general is cheekier. This is the Everyday Oracle or the Vera Sibylla Italiano, which I quite like. This has got the artwork that is similar to the Il Menigalo one, but it's easier to shuffle. There's also one with black edges that is really nice because it does have the English on top of it. But there's just something about this deck. Again, if you're comfortable with Lenormand or Kipper or Deste or those types of decks, that are what I call cartomancy style, gypsy witch style, fortune telling style decks like these, you can generally pick them up if you're comfortable with that style of reading. It's not too difficult but there's just something about this deck that is so cheeky. So beautiful, but you'll get things where it's just like that, like this board. You're asked a question, and even though it may not be saying anything, you'll sometimes get these readings where they're like, "What? Why are you bugging me? Go do X, Y, and Z, and quit harassing me." It definitely has a cheeky, irreverent energy to Sibylla. It's just, there's something about it, and because it's very Kipper. I mean, it's got all, the cards are, if you've used one of these style decks, you've used another. I think that technically Sibylla is sort of the grandmother of them all. I haven't sat down. I'm going to, because I've got a video I want to do on these style of decks, but I know that Kipper, I think, was certainly influenced by, they're all, I think, influenced by Sibylla in some way, but you can feel the similar reading style to all of them, but there's something about Sibylla that is cheeky and irreverent, and it's just a good deck. It's a good deck. Every time I'll get good answers, and I'll get the situation that I need to address, but it's always done in that really, okay, stop bugging me now and go do something about it, or really, like, you're asking me this again, I've already dealt, you know the answer, why are you bugging me? Always that kind of energy, right? It's just great. It's absolutely awesome. And then finally, your best friend. And of course, for all tarot decks, but this is my very first tarot deck. It was my only tarot deck for 9.5 years. This is the Llewellyn, not the Llewellyn Classic. It's the Llewellyn Tarot that is based off of Welsh mythologies. I have a fully trimmed one as well, but I had to get it back to its source. See, this is why I don't like babies and sun cards, because this is how I learned tarot, was with a strong Lou on here. And why I love the sword suit. This whole suit of swords is so beautiful. So anyway, tarot in general, right? This is tarot. This is the best friend. This is, let's kind of dig under the surface, a little therapist-y. But yeah, I mean, there's just nothing like a good tarot deck. And this is, again, I use this particular one because it was my first. I did also contemplate the Margaret Peterson because definitely a best friend. Although this one also has wise mentor. I first had this here in the wise mentor category because I think the Margaret Peterson is a wise mentor. But because people force you to pick certain numbers of things, I had to narrow the playing field down, right? So there you have them. This is and this is not my only friends. These are not my only friends. This does not have dice in it. This does not have like charm casting in it. This does not have pendulums in it. Like, there are many more friends here, but this is where I'm going for this circle of friends particular video. So I know this was a quick one, but I hope that you enjoyed it. And again, please take a check out Simon's video below and let me know in the comments, what are your circle of friends? What are either 5 tarot decks that fit those categories? However you want to do it. Be free to do it as you want, but what is your circle of 5 friends if you had to choose them? So everybody have an absolutely wonderful day.